Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Music Monthly September, October 2015. Alright, it seems to me that when I make these videos at the end of the month, they appear to be almost immediately out of date. So I've decided I'm going to do that weird sort of time-travelling magazine thing where you're always a month ahead of yourself, behind yourself. So this is October's Music Monthly, talking about what happened in September, which I'm going to release in September. Does that make sense? You know what I mean, you know what I mean. So anyway, we've got just a small handful of choice bits for you this month. We've got the surprise of Reactor 6, we've got more complexity in Amplitube 4, we've got UAD doing something for Windows users, good lord. We've got a little bit of BP nonsense coming from FXpansion, and we've got something called Zoto Pad. We have this bit of software which I want you to have a look at because for reasons which will become clear. I love Native Instruments. We used to distribute the original generator back in the distant past when I was working at Turnkey, and it was mind-boggling then because you had to build everything from scratch. And at least when Reactor came along, they started putting a bit of a front end upon all the sort of the noise and crackles and bleeps that you could make. With Reactor 6, Native Instruments have done something quite sort of genius with this concept of blocks. Looking every bit like a modular analog system, Reactor 6 sort of takes us away from that world of into a world of yeah, right, okay, yeah, cool. The complexity in Reactor has always been its sort of greatest asset at the same time as being its greatest sort of downfall. The ability to wire all these different synthesis components together is just completely awesome, while at the same time, for some people, being completely mind-numbing. And the more sort of casual users are often left with sort of a bunch of intelligible synths and weird-making groove boxes with no kind of coherent guide as how they all work. At least that's been my experience. In more recent versions, Reactor has spawned a few sort of self-contained synths, and this sort of blocks concept, I think, builds upon that a great deal. And you've got over 30 blocks with oscillators, filters, envelopes, modulators, noisy things, and sequencers which you can all wire together as elaborately as you wish. Essentially, this sort of builds in an extra level of accessibility for those of us who don't necessarily want to get a qualification in synthesis in order just to get some beeps and noises out. But underneath the blocks is all the same mad intensity that Reactor heads really like. It looks flipping awesome, and for 89 quid for the update version, it's definitely on my list. Although I am tempted to wait for the next version of Complete whenever that arrives, because that tends to include that, plus a load of other stuff for the sort of same price as the upgrade. So yeah, for sounds, for noises, crackles, beeps and crazy sort of weird stuff, Reactor has always been the best thing for that. But now, if you've never given it a go before because it seemed a little bit scary, then now is the time. This is definitely the one that's going to be a lot easier to use. So cool. Another old school company, IK Multimedia, have just released a new version of Amplitube. It's taken about 5 years to get from version 3 to version 4, so you'd be forgiven for thinking that IK are perhaps more focused on iPad stuff. And you'd be right. But luckily, someone has managed to squeeze this new version out. If you've never come across it before, it's basically a guitar effects processor amp modeler thingy. The new version looks pretty awesome, although it also looks remarkably like the previous version, but perhaps with just slightly higher res graphics and tweaking, that kind of thing. They are calling the sound hyper-realistic tone, which is of course streets ahead of super-realistic tone and mega-realistic tone, so that's nice. I love playing guitar, but I confess that I'm just not really a big guitar head. I haven't found the time to invest in guitar technology to really get my head around how it's all supposed to sound and what you're supposed to do with it. I mean, I sort of go off on these little journeys into line 6 and amp modelers, and I get effects processors and plug them all in and create these awesome sounds which I use once and then. But I'm always sort of happiest with my Orange Rocker 30 and, say, a delay pedal. Anything more complex than that starts to do my head in, so I'm probably not the best person to speak about Amplitube 4. So when IK talk about having 5 new British amp models, I don't really know what they're talking about. When they start banging on about 3D sort of mic placement and speaker selection, my eyes just kind of glaze over, and I start wondering whether I need to be some kind of guitar tech in order to use this software. There's just tons of stuff in here for the knob tweaking tone master. Got preamps, amps, cabinets, choices of wood, speakers, mics, rooms, carpet, distance away, farness, jack cables, amps, stomp boxes, models, I don't know. Post effects, that's the other one. Stomp and post effects and stuff. And it's all completely wireable and fiddleable with to your heart's content. But I also hope that you can just sort of sit down, flick a couple of presets and play guitar. That's what was so great about the original Amplitube. I run into similar sort of problems with Guitar Rig, really, in that it just becomes overwhelmingly complex and you kind of start losing just the joy of playing with sound. IK do sort of simpler, more focused versions of Amplitube, but then we run into their kind of annoying pricing structure, which just gets up my nose. For instance, they do a marvellous official orange version of Amplitube for the iPad for about €6, and they also do a version for the PC, which is €100. How can that be? What's that about? I don't understand. It just kind of makes the PC user just feel underappreciated. I'm sure it's a heck of a lot more powerful than the iPad version, but even so, the tone technology has ultimately got to be the same. Fish and chip on my shoulder. Anyway, at least version 4 has come down in retail price to €149 as opposed to being €199, and it's available now for only €99, which ain't bad at all. So even though I've given this my best sort of slightly cynical spin, Amplitube 4 is undoubtedly the most comprehensive guitar tone mangler software out there. It's always sounded great, it will continue to sound great, and if you're really into placing stuff and designing your own ultimate guitar tone, this is definitely for you. And it's really good to see that IK haven't forgotten all about it. So to complete this triptych of old school firms who were all present at the very first turnkey computer music show that I did back in 1999, we have F-Expansion, who at the time were peddling their DR008 drum machine, and then they kind of got lost into BFD and spent all their time creating this massive drum library virtual instrument thing, which is amazing. But every now and again they squeeze out sort of a noise making machine of some kind, and they have just released something called Strobe 2. Now I missed Strobe 1, it must have been folded into one of their DCAM things, I'm not sure, but anyway, so now we have this rather marvellous analog modelling polysynth. The blurb says that it retains the cult classic original signature character, a super oscillator with stacking, detuning and sync, a warm saturating VCA, the acclaimed transmod modulation system and a powerful multi-mode filter with 22 responses for massive tonal variety. Nice. I think the look of it isn't particularly special, but I like that it's a vector and so will scale to the resolution of your screen. But what I do know is that it's going to sound great because, well, it's F-Expansion. It's £119, which isn't cheap considering that Reactor 6 is £169, but I think it's probably worth it. On to some hardware then. Universal Audio have pretty much ignored Windows users for most of their releases. They're always promising that, oh yeah, Windows Thunderbolt drivers are just coming, we're just making them, they're almost here, and then nothing actually materialises. It looks like that they've finally given up on that lark and decided to release a more PC-friendly USB version of the Apollo Twin. Yay! The Apollo Twin is one of those high-definition, high-resolution, desktop big knob type audio interfaces like the Moto Track 16, the RME Babyface, or the Focusrite Forte. They call it a 2x6 interface, although there seem to be 2 mic line inputs and then a guitar input, and then there's 8 ADAT inputs. So it's more like a sort of an 11.6 interface. But anyway, of course what sets the Apollo apart is the 2 DSP chips inside, which allow it to run all of the UAD powered plugins, from which you can choose some of the best plugins available. Essentially it's the same box as the Thunderbolt Duo, but just with a USB 3 port, and so it's probably going to be priced around the same at about 650 quid, which is a lot of money. It's not an entry-level device. This is a high-end, high-quality, looking gorgeous on your desk, simple to use, with powered plugins, the Apollo Twin. Here's something a little bit different for you. FeelYourSound.com, which is a great domain name, have been messing around with something called Zoto Pad. I think it's Zoto Pad. Let's call it Zoto Pad, which is a multi-touch virtual MIDI controller that you can use on a touchscreen to send MIDI stuff into your DAW sequencer, etc. I mentioned it in my article on multi-touch for Sound and Sound that I did last year. Well, they have a new version on the go, which is currently in beta, and they're looking for people to try it out and to give them feedback on what they like and what they don't like. At a basic level, it's a multi-touch drum pad and MIDI controller, but they've expanded it to include a chord and a scale generator, as well as some XY pads, some faders and knobs, and bits and pieces. It rings round the complexity of something like Emulator, because it's just simple, it's there, and it's so easy to use. It's a bit of a work in progress, but it's a good, simple, and cool bit of software that would really appreciate some input. So go and try it out if you've got a touchscreen from the link below. There are some amazing films around at the moment, but I hardly ever get a chance to go to the cinema. So this month the release again is going to be recently out on DVD. And this month I'm talking about Kingsman: The Secret Service.
I've had a rather emotional day, so whatever your beef with Eggsy is, and I'm sure it's well-founded, I'd appreciate it if you could just leave us in peace.
You should get out of the way, Granddaddy, you'll get hurt.
Are we going to stand around here all day, or are we going to fight?
This is one of the funniest films I've seen in a long time, and I did actually get to the cinema to see it, sort of rather spontaneously based purely on. They were shot sort of in a way that I'd just never seen before. It was weird. You're not really believing what you're seeing because it's just so kind of comically realistic. It's gory, and a big heartfelt thank you to all of you lovely people who sent in messages of encouragement and support about the whole Surface Pro 3 blogging thing. It turns out that quite a few people think I do a worthwhile job of it, or at least no one said, "Nah mate, you're rubbish." So yeah, that's really appreciated, thank you. The good news is that Microsoft have invited me to their Windows 10 devices hardware launch on the 6th of October in New York, which might just give me the opportunity to try to persuade someone to throw me a Surface Pro 4 so I can continue with my mission of multi-touchy musicness. It's got to be worth a try anyway. So if any of the locals want to buy me a drink while I'm out there, then please do get in touch. Otherwise, I'll be live tweeting the event on my Surface Pro Audio Twitter handle, so follow me on Twitter and hang out from 10 AM New York time on Tuesday, the 6th of October, to find out the true story behind all of the media frenzy that will undoubtedly occur. So that'll be fun. Join us next month, and I will be talking about our new Skylake systems, amongst lots of other things. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.